disciplers. We can be a Peter, we can be a Jonah, or we can be a John.
Right.
Starting with Peter, we're going to read Matthew 26, 69 through 75. Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him, saying, You also were with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you are saying. And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to those who were there, This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth. But again, he denied with an oath, I do not know that man. And a little later, those who stood by came up and said to Peter, Surely, you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you. Then he began to curse and swear, saying, I do not know the man. Immediately a rooster crowed, and Peter remembered the word of Jesus, who had said to him before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So he went out and wept bitterly. So pretty much the first way that we can be a disciple is we can be a Peter. Peter had faith in God. He very clearly saw all the things he did. He saw blind men healed. He saw lepers healed. But he didn't act on his faith.
All right.
Ultimately, following the path of Peter leads to death. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also.
All right.
So every time Peter didn't obey God, he was sinning. Every time he said he wasn't of God, he was sinning.
Amen.
Peter also at the time, every time he denied Christ, he was fearing death. You got to understand, every time that you were against a priest at that time, you could be killed. And that just was what I was talking about a second ago. But whoever denies me before men, him I will also deny before the Father. Following this path ultimately leads to hell. Next, it's a little bit better. Being a Jonah. Jonah 1 through 3. Now the word of the Lord came to the son of Amittai, Jonah, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah arose to flee from Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. That word. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish. That word. From the presence of the Lord.
Amen.
Okay, so Peter was fearing death. See, Jonah was also fearful. Jonah was fearing what the people would think of him, which is what most of our problem is when we're being a disciple. We are afraid of what people will think about us because we're going to have to be here for, 70 years?
Come on.
How about 7,000 years? How about eternity in hell when you're not telling them about Jesus?
All right now, come on.
But the difference between Jonah and Peter is Jonah eventually turned around and did God's work.
Amen.
Jonah 3, 1 through 5. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it the message that I will tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, a 3-day journey in extent. And Jonah began to enter the city on the first day's walk. Then he cried out and said, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. So the people of Nineveh believed God, proclaimed a fast, and put on sackcloth from the greatest to the least of them. Go back. I'm not ready for that. Okay, so Jonah went and did the will of God. And because he went and did the will of God, the whole city was saved. The whole city was saved from hell, from eternal torture.
Amen. Amen.
But you know how Jonah did not do the will of God the first time? I'm pretty sure if he would have just went to Nineveh the first time, he would have spent 3 days in a whale. That would have made life a lot better. Now you can go.
Amen.
And now the third option is to be a John the Baptist. Matthew 3, 1 through 6. In those days, John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea and saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is he who is spoken of by the prophet Isaiah, saying, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight." Now John himself was clothed in camel's hair, with a leather belt around his waist, and his food was locusts and wild honey. Then Jerusalem, all of Judea, and all of the region around Jordan went out to him, and were baptized by him in the Jordan, confessing their sins.
Yes.
Okay, so John, he followed God's plan from the beginning.
All right.
And we don't see that he lived a luxurious life. We saw he was eating bugs.
That's right. Come on.
Have you guys ever ate bugs? They're not very filling. Not only that, but he wore the hair from animals, and he wore a leather belt. He wasn't comfortable at all throughout his path. But John followed God's path from the beginning.
All right. Amen.
And because of this, Jesus thought highly of John. But John isn't the limit. We can ascend higher than John.
Amen.
Assuredly I say to you, among those born of women, there has not been risen one greater than John the Baptist. But he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. John may have been like way up here, but here is not the limit.
All right.
Amen.
That's right.
It says that we will do greater things that Jesus did.
Yeah.
So now you can go. Okay, so there's one thing that God asks of us, and I was really keeping this short.
All right.
God asks us to make disciples, but first we have to follow him. We can't just go out and try to bring people to God. That won't work. We need to go to God first.
Amen.
It says, "Follow me, and then I will make you fishers of men."
Yes.
We can't just assume that when we tell people about Jesus, they're going to be saved.
That's right.
We have to go to the Father first. You want to see the Spirit and the power of God breaking out into these people's lives, you need to go to the throne. You can't just assume that they're going to be as easy to be saved as you. You need to go to the Father, the transforming God, the one who would change their life.
That's right. Come on.
We have been so consumed with doing things for God that we forget to do things with God.
All right.
I can't just go out and make everyone I see a disciple. They won't just believe me for my word. They need to see God themselves.
That's right.
When I was saved, it wasn't because I was raised in church. I was in church for probably 12 years before I was actually saved. I actually wanted to see God. We can't just bring them here and ask pastor to try to make them into disciples. That's not his job. His job is to feed us. Our job is to go out in all of the world and preach the gospel and bring people in. Now, God, you can come dig me out of a pit.
Amen.